Hey guys, tonight we rise with the moon still overhead and the city of Chang'an barely stirring. The air is soft and cool, the kind that brushes your cheeks like silk before the heat of day settles in. You blink up at wooden beams, breathe, in faint traces of soot and plum blossom, and stretch beneath a thin quilt in your second-floor room above the tea shop. Below, in the quiet street beyond the wooden shutters, there's a distant clatter of a cart, someone else already at work in the capital of the Tang Dynasty. A stray cat yowls, possibly challenging the paper lantern outside your door. You shush it gently, then shuffle over the wooden floorboards still cool beneath your soles. A bowl of water sits beside the door, reflecting flickers of early starlight. You wash your face, the chill instantly refreshing, and pull your linen tunic tighter around your waist. Downstairs, the clay teapot waits, blackened with use and comfortingly warm from last night's embers still sleeping beneath the hearth. You nudge them with a bit of bamboo, blowing softly. A glow returns. Soon the crackle of kindling sounds through the wooden walls, like applause from tiny gods. You hang a kettle above the rekindled flame and breathe in the promise of steam. Outside, the eastern sky begins to change, a subtle bloom of grey-blue that deepens into peach. You open the front shutters and the city begins to whisper. A boy with a wooden pole and lantern trots past, crying out the morning hour. A fishmonger's cart rumbles by, salted baskets shifting with each jolt. Pigeons beat the air from a rooftop, before settling again like sleepy monks. You sit on a low stool by the front window, cradling a warm bowl of first brew water. Not yet tea, just enough to test the fire and welcome the day. The tang of the mineral clay bowl lingers on your lips. Someone sneezes loudly down the alley, followed by laughter. It might be the baker's daughter again. By the time the sun breaks, free, golden soft and barely willing, you're already sweeping the shop's courtyard. Plum blossoms have drifted in overnight, their pink petals collecting in corners like gossip. You gather them in your sleeve, soft, almost too delicate to touch. A chicken watches you from the neighbor's step, its head cocked in judgment. There's a rhythmic comfort in morning ritual. The grind of the millstone as you prepare the day's first batch of roasted leaves, the way light falls through the paper windows in strips, catching flecks of dust in their golden net. You arrange cushions near low tables, fluffing them like a doting innkeeper, though it's mostly habit. Most guests are quiet, many are tired, some just want to sit and remember how to be human. Historically, tea houses in the Tang Dynasty weren't just places for drinking, they were the social lungs of the city. They pulsed with poetry, laughter, arguments about taxation, and the occasional impromptu wedding blessing. Tea culture was flourishing, shaped by Lu Yu's famous tea manual, The Classic of Tea. You've skimmed parts of it, but most of your technique came from your father, who said, "Pour like you're writing a poem, but never too long or you'll lose the rhyme." You smile, remembering him bent over the kettle, humming the same 3 notes every morning. You hum them now almost unconsciously as the water rolls to a quiet boil. It's almost time to open the door. Fringe fact for the insomniac in you. Some Tang scholars believe tea had mild spiritual qualities, capable of sharpening the senses for meditation or poetry. Others warned of its fiery nature, if consumed too late at night. But you know your regulars, most come here for warmth, not wisdom. A light knock on the back gate makes you jump. It's just old Kang from across the lane, dropping off firewood. You nod in thanks, slipping a dried persimmon into his coat pocket. He pretends not to notice, like always. The silent economy of neighbors. By now, the sky is bright enough to cast sharp shadows through the alley. You take a deep breath, fingers resting on the door's edge. You're not quite ready, but you open it anyway. The scent of tea, wood smoke, and early bread wafts outward. Your first guest will arrive soon, and so begins another day in the heart of Chang'an. By the time your first guest steps through the low wooden doorway, the tea shop hums like a well-tuned string. Sunlight filters through the lattice windows in clean stripes, casting golden lines across the lacquered tables. You glance up and offer a nod, no words needed. It's Mr. Fan, the scholar who never quite learned to whisper, but always arrives before the dew dries. He takes his usual spot, back to the window, facing the door like a general expecting news. His robes, dyed a deep russet, are still dusted, with flour from his breakfast bun. He always forgets to check. You fetch his preferred cup, glazed ceramic with a hairline crack near the rim. He claims the imperfection improves the flavor. Steam rises, curling slowly, and you pour with the practiced ease of 1,000 mornings. The first cup is a rinse. You swirl it, discard. The second is served with both hands. Mr. Fan sighs into, the warmth like it's a confession, then sips with exaggerated pleasure. Outside, the city begins to stir in earnest. Wooden shutters clap open. Merchants brush straw from their stalls. The metallic clink of weighing scales and the braying of impatient donkeys fill the air. A child runs past your shop, chasing a hoop with a stick, laughter bouncing off the flagstones. The neighbor's chicken, clearly offended by the noise, retreats under a cart. You move between stove and tables with quiet efficiency, lighting the incense coil that will burn until late morning. Its fragrance, mossy, floral, faintly smoky, wraps around the air like a second robe. One of the tea caddies clicks open. You scoop from the roasted leaves, letting their toasty scent rise. Your sleeves flutter as you move. Teal today, with a faint embroidery of clouds at the cuffs. Here's your first historical detail for the morning crowd. In the Tang Dynasty, tea wasn't brewed loose the way you might know it. Compressed tea. Bricks were shaved into powder or flakes, whisked into hot water, sometimes with salt or dried orange peel. The ritual was half performance, half medicine, and all comfort. Monks, courtiers, peasants, everyone had their own version. A second. Guest enters. This one is new. She's younger. Perhaps a visiting scribe or merchant's daughter, judging by the ink-stained fingers and cautious eyes. She bows politely, unsure of the custom. You offer her a smile and gesture toward a corner cushion. She chooses a seat near the orchid pot, eyes drifting to its delicate white blossoms. You bring her a lighter brew, golden, barely steeped, and she nods, her shoulders relaxing. You remember your first week running the shop after your father's death. Every customer felt like a test. Every gesture weighed and second-guessed. One morning you accidentally served sour pickled plums to a magistrate's wife. She made a face like she'd bitten a frog. You never quite recovered your nerve that week, but the tea kept flowing. People kept coming. Slowly the shop taught you how to breathe again. Here's a quirky tidbit for the truly curious. Some Tang tea masters believed the sound of pouring. Water mattered just as much as taste. A soft, steady stream was prized. Too loud and it was considered rude. You once watched a monk spend 10 minutes adjusting his kettle height to get the sound just right. The tea, mediocre, but the memory, perfect. Mr. Fan has now opened his scroll, probably another poem with too many metaphors about moonlight and longing. He sighs theatrically between stanzas. The young woman peeks at him over her cup, then quickly looks away when he starts mumbling. Rhymes. Outside, a musician begins tuning a peeper just around the corner. The notes pluck the edge of your hearing, bright and uneven. You set a pot to boil again, this one for a merchant who just wandered in complaining loudly about camel caravans and broken contracts. He wears saffron robes and smells of sandalwood. You suspect he just came from the Western market. He slumps into a cushion and groans, "Make it strong." "I've been negotiating with liars since dawn." You nod. Bitter oolong it is. You glance around the room and feel a quiet sense of satisfaction. This is the shop as it should be. Ebb and flow. Quiet and chatter. The faint click of bamboo cups. Meeting ceramic saucers. A scroll unfurling like a morning breeze. Here's your first historian's debate of the day. Scholars still argue whether Tang tea culture emerged more from Buddhist monasteries or secular court life. Monks prized it for its focus, poets for its inspiration, merchants for its warmth. Perhaps like everything else in the dynasty, it was a swirl of all these, blended gently over centuries. Someone knocks lightly, your cousin, delivering lotus, seed cakes still warm from steaming. You set them on a lacquered tray, brush your hands on your apron, and offer one to each guest with a murmured greeting. Mr. Fan waves his away with a sniff. "Gluten," he mutters. He says it like a curse, though you're fairly certain he just doesn't like sweets. The young woman accepts hers shyly, taking tiny bites like a sparrow, careful not to drop crumbs on her scroll. You tuck the rest of the cakes into a bamboo jar, place the lid with a soft tap, and pour another round of tea. The room breathes in sync. Outside, the bustle of Chang'an continues, loud and relentless. But in here, time folds softly. Another morning well steeped. The steam from the kettle rises again in smooth ribbons as you tilt the spout just so, coaxing the stream of water into a gentle arc. The tea leaves shiver as they're bathed, releasing their aroma, roasted chestnut, damp stone, something faintly grassy. You always notice that part last. The room hums now with a quiet sort of companionship. The merchant has propped one slippered foot against a stool, retelling his caravan ordeal in great detail to no one in particular. Mr. Fan interjects occasionally, offering unwanted poetic commentary about sandstorms and deserts of betrayal. The young woman scribbles discreet notes onto a narrow slip of bamboo, her brush strokes tiny but elegant. Just then, a flicker of movement at the door, your eldest regular, Auntie Wen. You barely need to glance to know it's her. The rhythm of her cane against the threshold is as familiar as the scent of rain on dry clay. Her arrival always marks the middle of the morning. A seat by the stove, she declares, as though the fire would move if she didn't command it. You fetch her cushion, the one embroidered with two overfed cranes, and she lowers herself slowly, knees popping like old wood. Her robes today are a soft indigo worn at the hems. She carries a bundle of dried jujube slices tied in reed string. Without asking, she hands them over. "For your throat," she says, then narrows her eyes. "You've been singing too loudly again at night." You haven't. She just likes having something to fuss about. Your hands work without needing to think. Drop 3 slices into the copper pot, add a pinch of tea from the dark tin near the back, a splash of honey water. Auntie Wen likes her tea, like she likes her stories. Long, sweet, and impossible to interrupt. Here's today's mainstream historical fact. During the Tang Dynasty, tea houses became key social spaces in urban life. Unlike earlier dynasties where tea was mostly medicinal, here it became entertainment, ceremony, debate hall, and gossip corner. Tea wasn't just a beverage, it was a civic ritual. Auntie Wen glances around the room, approving of the company. She leans toward Mr. Fan with the subtle grace of a cat who hasn't hunted in years, but still likes to watch mice. "Writing love poems again, Fan?" He pretends to ignore her, flipping his scroll with unnecessary force. "You should compose one for my niece," she adds with a wink, gesturing vaguely at the young woman near the orchids. The girl's brush freezes mid-stroke. You shoot Auntie Wen a look, which she meets with mock innocence. "What? I'm matchmaking. It's practically a public service." Outside, the clouds drift lazily across the pale sky. You notice a shift in the light, less golden now, more silvered. A breeze pushes through the tea shop, lifting a corner of someone's parchment and scattering a few petals from the flower arrangement near the altar. You move to tuck it back in place, your fingers brushing the porcelain vase. Here's a curious little tidbit. Some Tang households believed tea steam carried prayers upward more effectively than incense smoke. It was common to whisper a wish into your cup before the first sip. You've seen it once or twice here, an old man whispering before drinking, a child giggling into her mug. The wishes never leave the cup, but the habit remains. The bell above the door tinkles again. This time 2 figures step in together. One, a traveling monk, robes dust-streaked, eyes steady, carrying a cloth-wrapped satchel and the calm of someone who has walked for days without speaking. The other, a child no older than 7, face sticky with what you sincerely hope is fruit. The monk nods toward the corner table. You offer warm rice water for the child, who slurps it happily, and a dark, earthy tea for the monk, something grounding with hints of bark and fennel. He receives it with both hands, bows his head slightly and closes his eyes as he sips. You've learned not to ask monks where they've come from unless they tell you first. Some are freshly initiated, barely familiar with their vows. Others have seen kingdoms fall and rise, walked through wars and weddings, carried scrolls through deserts and poems across borders. Their silence often speaks louder than their tales. Mr. Fan, of course, can't help himself. "From the west, brother?" The monk nods once. From Dan Huang, the long road. That earns an impressed whistle from the merchant, who finally stops ranting about tariffs. Even Auntie Wen lifts an eyebrow. That's far, she says. You must have passed 5 kinds of madness to get here. 6, the monk replies calmly. If you count bureaucracy. You nearly drop the kettle laughing. Conversation sparks, like flint after that. Mr. Fan wants to know what legends the monk has collected. The child tugs gently at your sleeve, asking if the rice water comes with sweet beans. You oblige, adding a few to the bowl with a quiet clink. Here's a favorite historian debate to toss in while you stir. Scholars still argue whether these tea shops were truly egalitarian. Did class matter less over a shared kettle? Some records suggest they were open to all, merchant, monk, noble, thief, while others point to quiet hierarchies enforced by seating, service, or subtle custom. Maybe it depended on the shop, or maybe people have always tried to equalize themselves through ritual. Back at the monk's table, the child has curled against his arm, dozing softly. The monk drinks with slow precision, his gaze fixed on the swirling steam. Mr. Fan is already scribbling a poem he'll insist on reading aloud later. Auntie Wen nods off mid-sentence. The shop holds its breath, just for a moment. And you? You lean against the counter, watching your little world turn, gently steeping in the warmth of stories, silence, and tea. Later in the afternoon, the light in the shop shifts again. The shadows stretch longer, and the sun, hidden behind gauzy clouds, casts everything in a pale amber wash, like honey poured slowly across old parchment. You glance at the fire. It's still strong, the kettle puffing contentedly. Though the copper has darkened slightly with use, you'll polish it later. Probably. The lull of early afternoon is always the most contemplative time. The noise of the lunch crowd has faded, and even the street beyond the threshold seems to hold its breath. Sandaled feet pass quietly. A wooden cart creaks slowly by. A child giggles somewhere down the lane. Inside, the tea shop seems to hum with something like reverence. Mr. Fan has finally stopped speaking, his scroll now half-written and resting on his chest as he naps in the corner. The monk has moved to the back, meditating in the shaft of sunlight pooling beside the back altar. The child, curled like a dumpling against a pillow, sleeps so deeply you can hear the faint whistle of her breath. You refill Auntie Wen's cup. Before she even asks, she stirs, blinking at you with the confused grace of someone just waking up from a nap and pretending she wasn't. Did I snore? She asks, like a dragon defending its hoard. She cackles, then winces. My knee. You. Pass her a hot towel without a word. That's just the rhythm here. Complaint, kindness, repeat. Now that it's quiet, your hands move toward the herb shelf. It's not the busiest part of the shop, but for regulars, you offer tea blends tailored to moods and aches. A bit of chrysanthemum for tired eyes, dried ginger and hawthorn for bloated merchants, dandelion root for whatever ailment Auntie Wen insists she has this week. You're not a healer, not officially, but everyone has their rituals. Mainstream historical fact for this moment. During the Tang Dynasty, apothecary knowledge often blended seamlessly with tea service. Tea shops weren't just places to relax. They were wellness hubs, where herbal remedies could be masked in a warm, pleasant brew. Some historians even believe the earliest pharmacopoeias were shaped by recipes passed down through generations of tea keepers. You remember learning from your grandmother, her voice soft, her hands firm as she pressed your fingers into a jar of crushed angelica root. Smell first, she'd whisper. The nose knows before the tongue. She had a saying for everything. Some of them even made sense. A flicker of movement near the door pulls your attention. A group of young students enters, robes rumpled, cheeks pink from walking fast. You can tell by the scroll cases and the ink smudges on their sleeves. They've come from the city academy, probably just finished an exam. They smell faintly of sweat, old bamboo, and the existential panic of midterm grading. They bow politely, full of the exaggerated deference of young men still unsure how to act adult. Tea for studying, one of them says, and possibly forgetting. You nod solemnly. We have a blend for despair. They blink. I'm joking, you add. Mostly. You prepare a strong oolong with licorice root and ginseng, something to steady the mind, brighten the senses, and prevent immediate existential collapse. They crowd into the far table, still muttering about Confucian contradictions and miscopied proverbs. You hide a smile. This is a scene you've repeated with students for years. The exam day swarm, the quiet commiseration, the long sighs into tiny cups. Here's a quirky tidbit for this hour. Tang Dynasty students often carried lucky ink, homemade paste blessed by temple monks and sealed in tiny jade boxes. Supposedly it helped them recall obscure classics during provincial exams. Of course it didn't work, but the placebo was strong. One of the students waves you over. "Is it true," he asks between gulps of tea, "that the emperor once disguised himself as a tea merchant to see how the common people lived?" You shrug. Historians still argue whether that was the emperor himself or just a bored provincial governor with good taste in robes. They all laugh, except one, clearly the cynic of the group, who mutters, "It was probably a tax inspection." You leave them to their chatter and retreat toward the stove, where Auntie Wen is sniffing suspiciously at a new jar. "Is this dried tangerine peel?" "New batch," you confirm. She sucks her teeth thoughtfully. "Smells like someone's underachieving son-in-law." You blink. "That's oddly specific." She waves a hand. "Everything is if you're paying attention. By now the light outside has faded from amber to rose. A breeze pushes through the doorway again, and you catch the sharp sweetness of plum blossoms carried in from someone's courtyard tree. The shadows lengthen, stretching across the shop floor like lazy cats. You rest your hand on the counter, your fingers warmed by the polished wood. This is your favorite time, when the tea has steeped deep into everyone's bones, and the shop settles into something quieter than sleep, but warmer than silence, a shared pause. The monk stirs slightly from his meditation and opens his eyes. He gives you a small nod, one that carries thanks and something like respect. You nod back. That's enough. The students prepare to leave, stacking their cups and tossing crumpled scrolls into their satchels. "Will you stay open after the palace exams?" one asks. "Only if you pass," you reply. They groan dramatically, then laugh, then bow again on their way out. Auntie Wen watches them go, then sighs. "When I was their age," you smile. "You still are." "Liar," she says fondly. "Pour me more tea." You oblige. Evening in the tea shop unfolds not with haste, but like a poem being read aloud by someone who enjoys the sound of every syllable. The sky outside has turned the deep blue of washed indigo cloth, and the first lamps along the street flicker. To life, their light wavering gently behind patterned parchment. You step out for a moment to hang the red lantern that marks your door, the one etched with curling characters that declare the shop open for all, so long as they enter respectfully and wipe their feet. The scent of night has changed. Gone is the dryness of noon. Now it carries the damp, earthy fragrance of stone cooling after sunlight, layered with wisteria and a faint hint of frying sesame oil drifting over from the dumpling stall 2 doors down. You make a mental note to send for snacks later. You always forget to eat during the dinner rush. Back inside, you stoke the fire again, feeding it thin curls of sandalwood bark. The smoke curls upward in a pale ribbon, and someone hums softly. Behind you. It's the painter, just arrived, with his travel-worn scroll case and a new bandage around one thumb. He doesn't talk much, but he pays on time and leaves little sketches on napkins when he thinks no one is looking. You pour him a dark poussière, earthy and strong, and he nods in quiet appreciation. He takes a seat near the lattice window, where the moonlight pools like spilled milk over the floor tiles. His gaze drifts toward the paper lanterns, and you know he's already thinking in brushstrokes. The painter is one of your evening regulars, like the carpenter with sawdust in his beard, or the midwife who arrives just before closing and sips her tea with hands still red from delivering lives. Each of them carries stories like folded letters in their sleeves. You never ask, but you always listen. Here's a mainstream historical fact to chew on while you work. By the height of the Tang Dynasty, the capital city of Chang'an was a cosmopolitan hub with a population exceeding 1 million. Its tea shops were not just businesses, but vital social centers, frequented by poets, musicians, laborers, and foreign traders. Many even had second floors for musical performances or private games of Go. And if you've ever wondered where the phrase "talking shop" originated, well, historians still argue whether the Tang teahouse culture played a role. These were places where commerce and conversation mingled like jasmine in steam. You could discuss crop taxes with a bureaucrat in the morning, debate the merits of a poem over oolong at dusk, and overhear a secret about the Empress's jade, hairpin by midnight. You glance up as your apprentice returns from the market, cheeks pink with cold and hands full of bundles. She sets down the parcel with a soft grunt. "They were out of longan, so I brought osmanthus instead." You nod. "Good substitution, sweeter mouthfeel. Soak it before steeping." She grins. "Already did." There's something deeply satisfying about her quiet competence. She's only been apprenticed for a year, but she moves through the shop like she's grown into the floorboards. You remember your own early days? Your hands shaky, and your feet clumsy as you tried not to spill tea into anyone's lap. Progress happens slowly, like water wearing away stone, but it happens. Auntie Wen finally stands, stretching with a groan that sounds like a bamboo floorboard in winter. "Off to feed my cats," she says. "Tell the gods to be kind tonight." "I'll light incense, you promise?" She leans closer, winks, and adds, "And if you find a husband hiding under one of those tea tables, send him my way, so long as he brings wine." You laugh. Noted. She leaves with the slow shuffle of someone who measures time in careful steps. You watch her go, the red lantern above the door catching in the silver threads of her braid. As night deepens, the pace picks up again. A troupe of traveling musicians arrives, dragging their instruments and their exhaustion. You clear a space. Near the back and bring out the warming jars, clay pots filled with steeped chrysanthemum and slivers of candied citrus. Their lead singer is hoarse. You fetch a honey loquat brew and hand it over wordlessly. She gives you a grateful nod and sinks into a cushion like it's a temple. Quirky fringed tidbit for this part of your shift. Some musicians in Tang-era Chang'an would perform improvised tea songs, short rhymed verses about the blend they'd just been served. Patrons would pay extra for a funny one, and if the song made the tea girl blush, it earned the singer a free refill. It was a flirtation economy, powered by wit and hot water. You don't blush easily anymore, but you still remember one rogue who managed it, an acrobat with eyes like storm clouds and hands quick enough to steal your balance. He promised you moonlight, and all he left was a chipped cup and a half-finished verse. Still, the cup holds pens now, and you use it every day. The door creaks open again. Two cloaked figures enter, wrapped in velvet and mystery. They don't speak, but the taller one nods toward the corner booth, the one with the heavy curtain. You understand immediately. They're not here for tea, not really. You fetch your quietest blend, roasted barley and lavender, and pour it in thick-lipped bowls that don't clink when set down. Some nights, you're not just a tea server. You're a keeper of secrets. Outside, the stars have begun to bloom, pale and faint through the gauze of city smoke. You open the skylight just a crack, letting the chill brush your skin like a whisper. The painter is still drawing. The musician has fallen asleep, her head resting on a rolled-up robe. Your apprentice is counting coins with sleepy focus. And you refill the teapots. You sweep the floor in slow, patient strokes. You watch as the tea shop breathes in and out, a living heart of warmth in the city's chest. The night deepens its hold over Chang'an, and your tea shop becomes a small glowing cocoon in the belly of the city. Shadows press softly at the lattice windows, but inside, the light remains golden and steady. You move like a quiet current through the space, adjusting a curtain here, steadying a jar there. Barely noticed yet essential, like the unseen rhythm of breath that keeps a body alive. By now, your regulars have either drifted home or settled into familiar corners. The air carries a mellow, toasty scent, a mixture of iron teapots, warm grain, and sandalwood. You pause to inhale it slowly. It's the scent of peace, of work well done, and stories well kept. The curtained booth in the back remains silent. From time to time, you glimpse the glint of embroidered sleeves or the flash of a jade pin as one figure leans to whisper something urgent to the other. But you don't pry. A good tea master learns quickly that the more you know, the more trouble Finds you. You refill their cups with a careful hand and a bowed head. No eye contact. No questions. Near the hearth, your apprentice is carefully preparing the final round of the house's signature blend, smoked mountain green with pressed wild chrysanthemum and a pinch of orange peel. She moves with the methodical grace of someone learning not just process but intention. You watch quietly as she tests the water's heat with the back of her hand. Too hot, and the flowers wither. Too cool, and the flavor hides. She adjusts accordingly, a silent poem in motion. Mainstream historical fact for this dreamy interlude: tea preparation during the Tang Dynasty wasn't yet the elaborate codified ceremony it would become in later centuries, but it already held symbolic weight. Tang poets often used tea as a metaphor for clarity, patience, and the balance between strength and subtlety. Tea, in short, wasn't just for drinking, it was a mirror for how one lived. You recall a scroll once gifted to you by a traveling scholar. On it was written, "He who boils water hastily also burns the tongue of wisdom." You keep it framed near your back room, not out of pride, but because it reminds you to slow down, especially on nights like this, when the world asks nothing more than presence. The city outside may be sleeping or celebrating, one never knows which, but here the lull is meditative. Even the candles flicker with less urgency. You set a fresh bowl of plum biscuits on the front table, a small courtesy for those too polite to ask, but too hungry to resist. Someone thanks you softly, and you recognize the voice as belonging to the ink merchant, a man who always smells faintly of pine soot and rarely speaks above a whisper. You pour him a delicate cup of white tea, plucked early in the season. He prefers it that way. Less conversation, more contemplation, he once explained with a smile. You wonder what sort of calligraphy he'll compose tonight. What verse will emerge from the blend of tannins and memory? Then, a new sound, soft. Footsteps in straw sandals. You look up as an older woman enters, wrapped in travel-stained robes and leaning on a walking stick carved with moon runes. She bows deeply, and you respond in kind, instinctively offering her the corner bench where the warmth collects. She says nothing at first, just sips the barley tea your apprentice hands her and closes her eyes. Only after several minutes does she speak, her voice low and melodic. "Your shop smells like the kitchen of my youth." You smile. "That's the best compliment we could hope for. Quirky tidbit for your memory drawer. Certain Tang tea shops became so beloved by travelers that people would describe their hometowns in relation to their favorite tea house. You once met a merchant who said, "I was born 2 doors down from the old cedar pothouse," as if the tea house were a temple and his home merely its shadow. The old woman reaches into her satchel and pulls out a small cloth pouch. She places it on the table between you, unwrapping it slowly to reveal a handful of dried blossoms, twisted dark violet petals with a heady, almost peppery scent. "Purple hibiscus," she murmurs. "Rare, only grows on the southern cliffs." You nod reverently. "Shall I brew it?" "Please." Your apprentice watches closely as you prepare the unfamiliar tea. The water must be cooler, the steep brief. You use a clay pot, unglazed, to let the leaf speak fully. When poured, the brew is pale but richly scented, like honey over whetstone. You serve the old woman, then your apprentice, then yourself. The 3 of you sip together in quiet unison. You think again about how many kinds of silence there are in this world. The silence of grief, the silence of understanding, the silence of waiting, the silence of knowing when not to ask a question. Tonight's silence is a kind of communion. Across the shop, the painter looks up from his sketching. He watches the steam rise from the hibiscus bowls, then returns to his page, brush moving swiftly. Perhaps this moment will appear in his next scroll. 3 figures huddled around tea, breathing in the same small comfort, each imagining a different story in the steam. Historians still argue whether Tang tea culture was more medicinal, poetic, or philosophical in essence. Was it about healing the body, the spirit, or simply about the quiet luxury of being fully present in a world that moved quickly and forgot easily? You look around your shop and decide it's all 3. Maybe that's what makes tea so essential. Its refusal to be just one thing, like people, like stories. The wind taps lightly at the shutters and your apprentice rises to latch them. The room dims slightly, a gentle closing of the outside world. You smile to yourself, stretch your fingers, and begin wiping down the counter. The hibiscus taste lingers on your tongue, peppery, floral, strange, unforgettable. Behind you, someone hums an old lullaby. You don't know the words, but the tune feels familiar, like something your grandmother once sang in a language your dreams still remember. The fire sighs, the pot warms, the night continues. The hour tilts past midnight, and the tea shop takes on a new texture, softer, quieter, more inward. The laughter and conversation from earlier have thinned like steam, leaving behind a hush that feels sacred rather than empty. You move gently among the remaining guests, each one now cloaked in the silence of their own thoughts, cradling warm bowls between their palms as if holding on to small suns. The older woman has dozed slightly in the corner, her cup resting empty at her side. Your apprentice covers her with a thin cotton shawl dyed with faded indigo clouds. She doesn't stir. You make a mental note to offer her a bedroll in the back room if she doesn't wake before long. Your steps carry you to the front door, which you gently crack open to let in a sliver of the cool night air. Chang'an sleeps now, save for the occasional clop of a watchman's sandal on stone or the distant click of a lantern swinging in the wind. You spot a small stray cat darting between shadows, hunting for scraps as graceful as a poem scribbled in a hurry. You close the door slowly, careful not to let the latch click. In the stillness, you begin tidying the counters. You rearrange tea, bricks, and gently wipe down a lacquered tray, catching the candlelight in soft golden ripples. The rhythm is meditative. Swipe, turn, stack, breathe. A mainstream historical fact makes its way to your thoughts like a slow trickle of rain. During the Tang Dynasty, nightlife in Chang'an was strictly regulated. Curfews were enforced by city watchmen who closed the gates between districts at dusk. But tea shops like yours often received special dispensation to stay open late, trusted hubs of calm, not chaos, where poetry and philosophy were more likely to be brewed than trouble. In other words, you're a permitted nightlight in a city built to sleep by rule. At one table, the ink merchant has fallen asleep with his brush in hand, a smear of dark pine ink blossoming softly on the page, like a black chrysanthemum. You smile, then gently retrieve the parchment and set it aside to dry. It depicts a hawk with enormous wings swooping down toward a mountain pass, but with the peculiar addition of a steaming teacup balanced on one talon. You decide not to ask. You pick up a soft broom and begin sweeping the floor, slow arcs across worn stone. Each sweep is a whisper. The bristles catch scattered tea leaves, a sesame seed here, a lost coin there. It's strange what people drop in places like this. Sometimes items, sometimes burdens. From the back, your apprentice emerges carrying a stack of folded cloth napkins, which she begins laying out for tomorrow's breakfast set. You nod at her and whisper, "Make sure the one with the ink spot goes under the brush pot." She grins, understanding the silent in-joke. Now comes one of your favorite rituals, preparing the wind pot. It's a heavy ceramic vessel, etched with wind motifs and kiln-fired in smoky blue. Inside goes a mixture of dried lily petals, star anise, aged mandarin peel, and a single curl of fermented pu'er. You light the small burner beneath it and wait as the water begins to stir, the scent slowly blooming like a warm fog, quirky fringed tidbit for this quiet hour. Some Tang households believed wind pots helped ward off nightmares and settle wandering spirits. While there's no official doctrine on the matter, many tea shop owners, including yourself, consider them good luck. Besides, guests sleep better with something fragrant simmering nearby. The scent seeps into every corner of the shop, curling into dreams not yet dreamt. Your eyes rest for a moment on the hearth, where low embers glow beneath a kettle kept warm through the night. Fire, water, leaf, three quiet companions. Even without conversation, they speak to you in the language of heat and rhythm. Your apprentice hums softly as she folds linens. You recognize the tune now, an old folk song about a farmer who falls in love with a ghost that only appears when it rains. Classic Tang romanticism, sweet, eerie, a little tragic. Historians still argue whether such folk songs shaped Tang poetry or simply mirrored it. Were they the inspiration or the echo? Did the farmers sing what the poets wrote, or did the poets learn from the farmers' tune? No one agrees, but the melodies remain, lingering long after the singers vanish. You walk to the front shelves and inspect the row of scrolls tucked between jars of preserved kumquat and longan fruit. Each scroll contains something different: menus, fortune, poems, favorite riddles. On a whim, you take one down and open it. The calligraphy is yours, penned years ago in uneven ink. If you can read this without laughing, your tea is too cold. You chuckle quietly. Then roll it back up and return it to its home. Outside, a breeze rises, brushing past the doorframe with a faint howl, like someone sighing from another century. You and your apprentice exchange a glance, and then, wordlessly, you both move to check the bolts on the windows, the shutters, the back gate. Not because you fear thieves, but because tradition says wind always follows curious spirits. Back inside, you light a final stick of incense, sweet myrrh and cedar, and place it in a bronze holder shaped like a plum blossom. It smokes in lazy spirals, drifting up to join the last of the day's wishes tucked quietly into the rafters. The shop is nearly asleep now. So are you. By now, the city outside your walls is deep in its slumber, tucked beneath the folds of night like a scroll slipped into its case. The tea shop has settled into its quietest state, an almost sacred hush where breath and breeze are the loudest. Things. You dim the lanterns until only a few remain, one by the hearth, one beside the door, and a final one glowing faintly in the shrine niche beside the inner wall. It's time for offerings, not the grand sacrifices of incense and gold made at mountain temples, but the simpler, sweeter gestures of the everyday sacred. You retrieve a small wooden tray from beneath the counter and arrange 3 objects on it: a tiny bowl of freshly steamed rice, a half-moon slice of pear, and a thimble's worth of osmanthus wine poured into a carved horn cup. These aren't for the gods exactly, but for the household spirits, the ancestors, the friendly shadows who keep teacups from cracking and guests from arguing too loudly. You place the tray before the household shrine, a lacquered alcove painted with motifs of cranes and pine. Then you bow once slowly. Your apprentice mirrors you beside the stairs, her sleeves falling gracefully with the motion. A mainstream historical fact drifts gently into the moment. During the Tang Dynasty, ancestor veneration was woven into daily domestic life. Not limited to tomb festivals or ancestral halls, it found its way into homes, markets, even tea shops like yours. It wasn't worship, it was memory, gratitude, an unspoken contract with those who came before. You close your eyes briefly, whispering, a name you haven't spoken aloud in a while, your grandmother, who first taught you the way of tea by letting you ruin her favorite leaves. The warmth of that memory rises like steam. You smile and the moment passes. A breeze flutters the hanging curtain between the front room and the kitchen. You turn toward the back, into the part of the tea shop guests never see. The small pantry filled with stacked baskets of dried mushrooms, tins of tea, knots of ginger root and dried jujube. You inspect a few shelves, noting what needs restocking, and tap a wooden list hanging on a nail. It swings slightly, the characters scrawled in your apprentice's careful but slightly crooked brushwork. The shelves are quiet tonight. Even the dried tangerine peels seem to rest. As you walk back toward the hearth, you hear a soft cough. The old woman in the corner is waking, blinking slowly, her silver hair like silk unraveling from a spool. You kneel beside her and offer a warm towel scented faintly with jasmine. She presses it to her cheeks, murmuring her thanks, then glances at the hearth and asks, "Has the fire been fed?" You nod. "Twice." She smiles. "Good. Fires like to be remembered." A quirky fringe tidbit floats in with her words. Some Tang households kept house fire spirits, believed to be soot sprites or flame dwellers who ensured warmth and harmony if treated kindly. Forgetting to feed the hearth or letting the coals die entirely was considered a quiet insult to these guardians. You don't necessarily believe it, but you've never let the fire go cold either. Just in case, your apprentice brings a warm bowl of red bean porridge and a soft rice cake to the woman, who begins eating slowly, the calm rhythm of her spoon scraping porcelain barely louder than the cicadas outside. You catch your apprentice's eye and give a tiny nod of approval. Across the room, the ink merchant is stirring now too, blinking at the ink blotch on his arm like it belongs to someone else. "Did I finish the hawk?" he mumbles. "Almost, you say. But the teacup needs work." He frowns as if considering whether that's criticism or poetry. The sky beyond the small upper window is starting to shift. Still deep, still ink dark, but with a thin thread of steel blue unwinding at the edge. Dawn doesn't arrive all at once in Chang'an. It sneaks, it lingers, it tests the silence first. Historians still argue whether Tang Dynasty citizens rose before the sun by necessity or by cultural habit. Some claim the strict city gates, locked from dusk till dawn, meant that life had to start early once passageways reopened. Others suggest it was agricultural muscle memory, inherited even by city folk. Either way, the people of this era rarely wasted the sun's return. You pour yourself a small cup of chrysanthemum tea, now cool but fragrant, and sip it slowly by the door. The curtain flutters again. This time, it's the sound of someone outside. A gentle tap on the doorframe, barely a knock. You open it and find a boy, no more than 12, holding a basket with both hands. "From my uncle," he says, bowing deeply, "for your morning soup." Inside are handfuls of soft tofu skin, a bundle of coriander, and a pale, coiled root that smells faintly of garlic and rain. You thank him, offer a dried plum in return, and close the door again. The tea shop is beginning to shift once more. The hour is still night, but with a question mark at the end. One lantern flickers, another stays steady. You glance over at the hearth and murmur, "Time to wake again, little."
Fire!
A soft clatter comes from the kitchen, your apprentice already starting the morning preparations. You hear the distinctive tap of a ladle against the sides of the clay soup pot and the rustling of herb bundles being untied. You follow the sound, drawn by the gentle rhythm of routine, the silent promise of another day beginning. The kitchen is still mostly lit by the glow of banked embers. You stoke them gently, watching as orange tongues stretch upward, licking the base of the iron kettle. Hung over the hearth, steam begins to rise as water warms, and the familiar aroma of toasted rice and ginger fills the air. It's a comforting scent, earthy, faintly spicy, anchored in memory. Your apprentice kneels by the counter, carefully slicing thin rounds of lotus root and soaking them in cool water to retain their pale color. "Shall I prepare the soft millet?" "Two?" she asks, glancing up. "Yes," you reply, "and the salted plums, one for each tray." She nods, her motions precise, her sleeves rolled neatly to avoid the wet wood. Watching her is like watching a quiet dance. Every motion taught by repetition, each step honed into a ritual of its own. A mainstream historical fact slips easily into your mind, like a bookmark placed between steps. The Tang Dynasty saw a golden age of culinary refinement, especially in the capital. Chang'an's kitchens, whether royal, aristocratic, or humble like yours, were filled with an array of ingredients brought in by trade. Spices from the south, noodles from the north, dried shrimp, lotus seeds, and fresh bamboo shoots when the season allowed. Even the imperial court issued seasonal recipes. Not that your tea shop could ever compete with palace fare, but its quiet, hearty meals had a following of their own. You start assembling the trays for your earliest customers. These are the ones who arrive before the sun, rubbing sleep from their eyes with hands that still smell of ink or iron. You line the shallow lacquer trays with small dishes, a scoop of millet, a curl of pickled cucumber, a hard-boiled quail egg, dusted with salt, and a chunk of rice cake warmed over coals. Next to it you place the tea, delicate green leaves steeped in mountain spring water, the first pour of the day. The door beads part softly as the first figure slips inside, an older man with a thin beard and a woolen cloak damp from early. "Do?" He bows to you, says nothing, but settles into his usual spot near the window. You bring him his tray. He nods once, already lifting his bowl in two hands for the first sip. It's a gentle exchange, practiced and wordless. He's been coming. For years, though, you still don't know his name. Perhaps he prefers it that way. A quirky fringe tidbit floats gently to the surface of your thoughts. In some Tang neighborhoods, local tea shops were known less for their drinks and more for their silence. People came to listen, to music, to gossip, to birdsong in the rafters. Some shopkeepers were said to refuse loud guests, politely redirecting them to more boisterous establishments across town. You've never had to do that here. Somehow your regulars understand. This place invites quiet. Another customer arrives. A scholar with ink-stained sleeves and a folded letter tucked behind one ear. He hums under his breath, the tune only half formed, like a poem still searching for rhythm. You serve him his tray and he smiles. "Did you hear the frogs last night?" he asks. You shake your head. "Just the tea boiling." "Same sound, really," he says, "but one speaks of spring, the other of breakfast." He chuckles softly at his own observation and returns to reading the scroll unrolling across his lap. Outside, the city begins to breathe. The sky lightens, shifting from blue to that faint golden pearl color that only exists for 10 minutes each. Morning. In the distance, the faint creak of a cartwheel, the low bark of a dog, the metallic ring of a faraway bell. Chang'an is stirring. Historians still argue whether the capital ever truly slept. With its thousands of residents, towering pagodas, night markets, guards and patrols, it's possible that at least one person was awake at every moment. But in these early hours, before the real noise begins, it feels like the entire city inhales. Together, quiet, unified, sacred. You pause beside the door and breathe with it. For now there is no imperial decree, no merchant haggling, no parade of camels from the west. There is only tea, steam and morning light catching briefly on your shop's wooden sign. Your apprentice finishes her work and joins you at the doorway. Together you listen. Then she leans in and says, "You forgot to restock the salted beans." You nod solemnly. A grievous oversight. "I'll prepare them now. I'll add the apology banner." She grins and disappears back inside. You smile too. It's these moments, quiet, mundane, warm, that keep you anchored. Not the big festivals, not the rare imperial visitors, but the slow unfolding of a tea shop's morning, ladle to bowl, tray to hand, story to silence. As the morning gains strength, your little shop begins to swell with voices. Not loud, never loud, but a gentle undercurrent of greetings, footsteps and clinking cups. The doorway beads click steadily now, parting every few moments as another. Regular steps inside, brushing off sleeves and offering a polite bow. You welcome them each with a nod, a few knowing words and trays that never vary in essence, though no two are ever quite alike. Today's tea is a slightly roasted green, sourced from a hillside grove south of the city, the leaves twisted like tiny scrolls. You steep them carefully, watching the water darken into a pale amber hue. With every pour, steam curls upward like lazy calligraphy, sketching invisible poems into the air, before vanishing just as quickly. One young woman brings a small string instrument, settling herself beside the window and plucking at its strings, absent-mindedly. The soft sound threads itself through the air like spun silk, not demanding attention but enhancing the atmosphere, much like salt in soup. A portly man in a russet robe lowers himself onto a cushion and exhales dramatically. "The paper market's chaos this morning," he declares to no one in particular. You'd think scholars were hoarding for an apocalypse of ideas. A few chuckles. Someone offers, "Better that than another shortage of ink." You shake, your head fondly as you pour more water into the kettle. A mainstream historical fact drifts through your thoughts. In the Tang Dynasty, paper production became an art form of its own. Chang'an's paper markets flourished, with shops offering different weights, sizes, colors, even scented varieties. Bureaucrats, scholars, poets, all relied on paper not just for work, but for expression, correspondence, and legacy. A sheet of well-made paper could carry a name into history, or simply wrap tomorrow's rice dumpling. Your apprentice brings over a small tray of rice cakes shaped like chrysanthemums, each stamped lightly with a red bean paste seal. She's getting better with the molds. You make a note to compliment her later. From the far table, the scholar with the ink-stained sleeves asks, "Do you believe a single poem can shift a man's fate?" You glance over. If the right person reads it, he nods thoughtfully. "Then I'll write carefully." Tray quirky tidbit surfaces. There are tales of Tang courtiers who earned imperial favor not through deeds, but stanzas. Lines of verse so poignant, so delicately structured, they moved even the stoniest emperor. One official, it said, was promoted, After a single poem comparing raindrops on bamboo to tears on an exiled bride's cheek. Historians still argue whether that account is true or just an enduring myth meant to flatter the literati. But even now you've seen poems pinned to pillars, etched onto clay cups woven into fans. In Chang'an, words have gravity. Outside, the city is fully awake. Through the open shutters, you catch glimpses of passers-by. A monk in saffron robes walking with practiced purpose. Two young boys carrying water buckets, splashing each other despite their mother's stern warnings. A baker unfurling a cloud of flour as he slaps dough into shape. The rhythm of the day has begun. You feel it in your bones. The shift from morning, hush to steady pulse, your apprentice returns with the salted beans. Crisis averted, she announces. You raise an eyebrow. What banner did you prepare? She points to a scrap of parchment tacked beside the door. Salted beans late today, the cook was dreaming. A few customers chuckle as they read it. You allow yourself a smile. A mild breeze stirs through the shop, catching the edge of the parchment and lifting it slightly before letting it fall again. Even the air seems amused. One elderly customer leans over his tea and murmurs, "It's strange, isn't it? How a place can become a person." You pause in your sweeping. "What do you mean?" He gestures lazily at the room. "This shop. It has your mannerisms. Quiet, warm, polite, though occasionally teasing." You blink. It's an oddly touching observation. He sips. "My daughter's school has that same air, except it smells of chalk and ambition. Places become who lives in them." He's not wrong. Your shop is built of wood and clay, but also habits, kindnesses, rhythms. Here it's worn smooth by the same footsteps, infused with the stories people don't even realize they're telling. You return to sweeping, slower now, letting the thoughts settle. One young boy spills his tea. You reach for a cloth, but his mother is quicker, dabbing gently at his robe. "We'll clean up," she says apologetically. You nod, offering another cup with a wink. The boy beams, embarrassment forgotten. In the far corner, someone begins humming. The tune is ancient and unfinished, changing slightly with each repetition. No one seems to mind. You step out for a moment to stretch your legs. The sun is just shy of its peak, light filtering between rooftops and catching on wind chimes that tinkle gently as someone passes beneath. You look up. For a second, everything holds still. The birds, the wind, even the noise. A pause, a breath, then the moment passes and life resumes its gentle pace. Back inside the shop, you notice the incense has nearly burned down to a curl of ash. Its smoke, once rising in elegant spirals, now drifts faintly sideways, nudged by the stirrings of midday air. You light another stick, jasmine this time, and its fresh perfume mingles with roasted grain, dried citrus peel and the warm scent of aged wood. The lull of late morning begins to set in. The earlier bustle quiets to a contemplative hum, as patrons lean back on cushions, bellies comfortably full and minds wandering. Conversations drift more slowly now, more philosophical than practical. Someone is reciting a couplet about cranes and falling leaves. Someone else is napping, chin tucked to chest, fingers still curled around a cooling teacup. The rhythm of your movements changes too, less brisk, more meditative. You sweep slower. You pause to listen more. You refill cups before they are empty. A mainstream historical fact surfaces as you watch a man near the back carefully unroll a silk scroll. In Tang, China, tea houses were more than places to drink. They were hubs of culture, learning, and local gossip. Musicians and poets often performed in the corner of such shops. Sometimes monks would stop by and debate metaphysics between sips, and often government officials would blend quietly into the crowd, ears open, eyes watchful. You glance at a stranger who's just arrived, his robe plain but crisp, his gaze sharp despite a smile. Could be a tax clerk, could be a poet, or both. In Chang'an, one rarely ruled out either possibility. Your apprentice gestures quietly. There's a group of visitors at the door, not locals. You can tell by their accent as they step inside. Softly curious, murmuring greetings in formal tones. Traders, maybe, or scholars from the western provinces. Their robes are subtly different, longer sleeves, higher collars, woven with unfamiliar dyes, indigo dark as midnight, and a burnt ochre. That's rare in the capital. They admire the menu painted on the wooden plaque near the counter. One of them squints at a character and chuckles. "Your brushstrokes curve like a dancer," he says to your apprentice. She bows awkwardly, unsure if it's a compliment. You bring them bowls of smoky lapsang, a tea so bold and unfamiliar it startles them, but then earns an appreciative hum. One leans in and whispers conspiratorially, "Back home we flavor ours with yak milk." You nod politely. "We prefer peaches." A fringe tidbit drifts into your thoughts. While the Tang capital was famous for its refined tea culture, regional variations flourished throughout the empire, some bordering on the bizarre. There were tales of tea brewed with onion peels in the highlands, or seasoned with dried shrimp in southern fishing towns. Historians still argue whether those practices were signs of local creativity or just desperation. At the center table, an older gentleman unrolls a fabric pouch and withdraws a single porcelain cup, his own. Not rare in this part of the city, many patrons keep their favorite vessel here, stashed in a lacquered cabinet along the back wall. You keep track of them, all who like smooth clay, who insists on blue glaze, who prefers the featherlight porcelain from the southern kilns. You retrieve his cup and rinse it with hot water. He watches with a twinkle in his eye, knowing you'll always remember which leaf he prefers. Something mellow, something smoky, something contemplative. Ruogu Hua, you say, placing the cup before him. Osmanthus tea. He nods in satisfaction, murmuring something about memory being the truest hospitality. Outside, the street pulses gently. A dog barks once. A fruit vendor calls out a price for apricots, his voice bright against the hum. From somewhere down the lane, the soft ring of a temple bell chimes noon. You move to the back room for a moment, letting your apprentice take over the counter. Inside, bundles of tea leaves line the shelves, carefully labeled, each pouch wrapped in silk or waxed paper. The air in here is denser, earthier. You inhale deeply. On one shelf rests a tiny wooden box carved with plum blossoms. You open it and run your fingers over the contents. Dried jasmine pearls, a few leaves of wild-picked puer, and a folded note someone left long ago. You don't read it. You never do. But you keep it. Moments later, you're back out front, just in time to catch the tail end of a joke. Something about a scholar, a rooster, and a rainstorm. You don't ask for the setup. Sometimes the punchline is all you need. A new pot steams gently. Your apprentice watches it like it might escape. "Too hot?" she asks. You glance, then nod. "Let it cool a breath." That phrase again. Let it cool a breath. Your teacher used to say it. Her teacher before her. Generations of tea makers, steeped into every word and motion. A young couple near the window stirs. He adjusts her shawl. She offers him the last dried plum. Their silence is full of trust, like tea that doesn't need sugar. You step outside once more, leaning briefly against the doorframe. The sunlight is softer now. A child runs past, chasing a paper kite shaped like a carp. The string trails behind, him like a comet's tail. In the distance, you hear the faint creak of ox-cart wheels, the flutter of cloth banners in the breeze, the steady clack of a weaver's loom echoing faintly from a second-floor window. Back inside, someone's humming. Again, it might be you. A subtle shift in the light cues the beginning of afternoon's golden descent. The sun slants lower over the rooftops, drawing long shadows that stretch across the tiled street outside your door. Inside, the tea shop hums on, gently echoing the heartbeat of Chang'an in this unhurried hour. You're polishing cups when a soft thump at the counter draws your attention. It's an old customer, a woman in a charcoal robe and white headscarf, her hands rough from years of stitching brocade. She sets down a basket covered with linen and lifts the edge slightly, revealing 2 hand pies, sesame and jujube. You smile. This is the rhythm you love, the silent barter of favors and flavors. She doesn't ask for tea. She never does. You bring her a bowl of green tea brewed so delicately that the leaves float upright, like dancers balancing on tiptoe. A mainstream historical fact stirs to the surface as she sips quietly. In Tang Dynasty China, women often held important roles, in local commerce from silk traders to herbalists. While Confucian norms favored modesty and discretion, women still moved through the city's marketplaces and tea shops, often shaping their communities with quiet authority. She says nothing as she eats, eyes flicking over the calligraphy scroll, pinned to the far wall. You hung it yourself last spring, 8 characters inked in graceful curves. A clear heart brews the gentlest cup. It's part proverb, part aspiration. From the kitchen, your apprentice emerges carrying a kettle, larger than her head. She staggers slightly, grinning, cheeks pink from the steam. You trade a knowing look, too much water again, and help her steady it on the brazier. The coals hiss. She fans them gently with a folded fan. Then comes a voice, half lost to memory. "May I sit?" You turn and blink. It's Master Chen, the old poet who vanished from the neighborhood 2 winters ago. His beard is longer now, streaked with white like the edge of a rain cloud. He leans on a walking stick, carved with a crane and phoenix. You guide him to the window seat. He sighs as he lowers himself down, then gestures vaguely. Something bitter. Something that remembers. You know exactly what he means. You fetch a tin from the top shelf, aged dark tea compressed into small bricks like ancient treasure. You break off a sliver, rinse it in hot water, then steep it slowly in a glazed pot with a cracked lid that survived more dynasties than most families. The tea is earthy, woodsy, like autumn leaves pressed into memory. He sips and nods once. "Still too young," he mutters, but smiles anyway. A fringe tidbit floats through your thoughts. In some mountain villages, tea was used not just as beverage, but as currency. Compressed bricks could be traded for rice, salt, even horses. Some say a single cake of rare tea once bought a scholar 10 years of lodging and a wife with clever eyes. Historians still argue whether that's exaggeration or evidence of tea's prestige across all social layers. You suspect both. Master Chen clears his throat, then recites a line so suddenly that a cat sleeping under the counter bolts upright. "Yesterday's river is not today's stream. Drink deeply, forget the rest." A regular near the brazier chuckles. "I liked your one about the goose better." "Which goose?" Chen asks, mock serious. "I've written at least 4 goose poems. One had a revolution in it." A soft murmur of laughter spreads through the room. Even the woman with the hand pies cracks a smile. Outside, the city moves in a rhythm all its own. A courier dashes past, scroll clutched under his arm. A group of musicians idles under a fig tree, tuning lutes. A fish vendor begins to shout about a new catch, his voice rich as broth. Inside, the tea darkens slightly in the cup, swirling like ink in a scholar's well. Your apprentice leans against the doorframe beside you. "That man," she whispers, nodding toward Chen. "He once told me my poem was good." "Was it?" you ask. "No," she grins, "but he said it kindly." You nod, watching the sun spill warmth across the lacquered table, catching the steam, rising from each bowl in golden halos. Later, the bell over the door jingles softly. A student enters, dressed in exam robes, his face pale and anxious. He carries a bamboo box under one arm and bows too deeply, nearly losing his balance. "Your house brews clarity," he says nervously, "and I need all I can get." You motion, him toward a corner cushion, and bring out the clarity tea. An infusion of ginkgo leaf, lotus root, and a single dried wolfberry. It tastes like promises and library dust. He sips, then exhales, visibly less haunted. You're reminded of a Tang-era superstition, that certain teas could cleanse not only the body but the mind, allowing clarity before a great decision. There are records of generals sipping chrysanthemum brew before battle, of poets drinking pine needle tea before composing odes to the moon. Historians still argue whether the effects were real or simply placebo. But in this shop, clarity sometimes arrives in steam and silence. The afternoon begins to fade into early evening. Sunlight takes on a coppery hue. The scent of tea leaves steeped and re-steeped, begins to drift lazily toward the rafters. You rest, your palms on the warm wood of the counter, and look out over the shop. Each customer, each friend, each stranger folded gently into the rhythms of this day, drawn here by thirst, curiosity, or simply the soft pull of routine. Another kettle sings. The copper-tinted sunlight slips further across the tea shop floor, stretching golden fingers between the wooden floorboards and onto the patterned mats near the low tables. The atmosphere is soft now, half whisper and half haze, like the final pages of a long, slow novel. A distant gong sounds from one of the Buddhist temples down the street, its resonance like a heartbeat through the stone and tile of Chang'an. You glance up from rinsing another set of cups, catching the last glimmer of that bronze evening light bouncing off the rim of a ceramic pot. Customers linger longer during this hour. The woman with the hand pies has dozed against the window frame, her empty bowl resting beside her like an old friend. Your apprentice is carefully refolding napkins into lotus shapes, humming a tune she likely learned from a street performer with a missing tooth. The door creaks open. A breeze carries in the scent of pine smoke and hawthorn. Two scholars enter, mid-argument, one waving a bamboo scroll animatedly, the other rolling his eyes so hard you fear they might detach. They bow out of habit and take their usual seats. Near the incense stand, you bring over 2 bowls of chrysanthemum tea, fragrant pale yellow studded with delicate petals. The scholar with the scroll nods gratefully, still mid-rant about Confucian interpretations of justice. The other simply murmurs, "You bring peace, even when he won't." You've heard this debate before. It changes slightly with each visit, but the rhythm is the same. Theory, rebuttal, loud slurping, temporary silence. It's oddly comforting, like hearing a favorite song played on slightly different instruments. A mainstream historical fact resurfaces. Tang Dynasty tea culture was closely tied to intellectual life. Tea shops near academies and administrative offices became unofficial salons where poets, judges, and ministers met to exchange ideas and sharpen their arguments over steaming bowls of brew. Tea was not merely a drink, it was social cement. Across the room, Master Chen has fallen asleep again, his walking stick leaning precariously against the wall, mouth slightly open as if halfway through a forgotten poem. Your apprentice tiptoes by and gently drapes a folded cloth over his knees. You step outside briefly, letting the cooler air nip at your sleeves. The sky is soft plum, streaked with peach. Lanterns begin to flicker to life along the alleyway, their gold light trembling like fireflies behind silk. A boy runs past barefoot, chased by a girl wielding a broom like a sword. Their laughter bounces against the clay walls, echoing the simple delight of dusk. A cart creaks by, piled with clay jars sealed with wax and twine. The driver nods to you. He's delivered fermented plum syrup to your shop before and disappears down the street, wheels whining over cobblestones. You step back inside, where the light now glows amber and the air is infused with warmth and quiet purpose. Your apprentice is carefully arranging mooncakes in a lacquered box for a departing guest. You add a sprig of jasmine to the lid before tying it with twine. A fringed tidbit surfaces from your memory. In the later Tang period, tea houses began, incorporating snacks and small cakes, a precursor to more elaborate meal pairings in later dynasties. Some particularly elegant establishments even hosted small performances, flute music, puppet plays, or poetry readings. Historians still argue whether these early tea shops should be considered the ancestors of modern cafes, or something entirely unique to Chinese culture. You suspect the answer lies somewhere in between, steeped in tradition yet always evolving. At the counter, a young couple shyly orders their usual osmanthus tea, brewed lightly and served with slices of candied lotus root. They always sit near the shadowed corner, whispering softly, fingers just barely touching over the rim of the table. You suspect they haven't yet told their families they meet here. You bring their tea with a smile and a nod, offering quiet consent. In this shop, secrets steep just as well as leaves. As the room darkens, the brazier's red glow grows more pronounced. Your apprentice stirs the coals gently, coaxing heat for one last kettle. The iron lid rattles faintly with each gust from the open window. A cat slinks in from the back alley and leaps gracefully onto the counter. It meows once, then curls into a circle on a folded towel. The regulars barely notice. It's part of the furniture now, a purring punctuation mark on your day. You glance at the list on the wall, today's steepings, tomorrow's deliveries, a note reminding you to mend the broken shelf in the back storeroom. The handwriting is yours, but the feel of it belongs to something larger. The invisible weight of time, repeating tasks, and small rituals that become life's quiet scaffolding. Another customer leaves, bowing politely and leaving behind a silver coin and the faint scent of camphor. You add the coin to the lacquered box and place a fresh teacup on the shelf behind you, rinsed and still warm. Outside, the stars are just beginning to flicker through the haze of city lanterns. The sky is no longer purple, but deepening blue, infinite and still. In the corner, the scholars continue arguing, though now they've shifted topics entirely, to the ethics of naming one's child after constellations. Their tea has gone cold, but they don't seem to notice. Your apprentice yawns, covering her mouth with the edge of her sleeve. She looks to you, eyes asking, "Are we nearly done?" You nod gently and reach for the kettle, refilling the last few bowls and feeling the rhythm of the day settle into a familiar close. Soon the mats will be rolled, the incense pinched out, the shutters drawn. But for now there's still warmth, still steam rising in curling threads, and still the quiet comfort of stories steeped in tea. The final light of day leans low against the rooftops as the sky settles into full indigo. The moon, only just risen, throws a faint silver haze over the tiled eaves of the surrounding buildings. Inside the tea shop, warmth lingers like a long exhale, soft, slow and tinged with wood smoke. You move through the room with deliberate care now. The pace has slowed. Fewer voices, longer silences. Most patrons have already departed, leaving behind empty bowls, crumpled napkins, and lingering trails of conversation. You collect each piece gently, like gathering the fragments of a pleasant dream before waking. The apprentice begins sweeping. The soft scrape of straw bristles on wooden planks, blending into the rustle of the nearby silk curtains. She hums under her breath, something tuneless but comforting. You recognize it as a lullaby from her village, and for a moment you're carried there too. Bamboo groves, fireflies, a house with paper windows flickering in the wind. You light a final lantern near the doorway. Its flickering flame bathes the threshold in warm gold. Beyond it, the alley glows with reflections of moonlight bouncing off wet stones. The faint sound of a distant flute filters in from somewhere down the lane, fragile and wistful. At the central table, Master Chen wakes with a start, snorts softly, and looks around in mild confusion. "Still here?" he asks, blinking. You nod and bring him a small bowl of warm water, knowing it will ease the stiffness in his joints before his slow walk home. "Tea shops," he mutters, sipping carefully, "are the last honest places left." You smile. He says this often. A mainstream historical note drifts through your thoughts. During the Tang Dynasty, tea shops were among the few spaces in urban centers that welcomed a wide range of social classes. From merchants and musicians to students, monks and magistrates, all could sit and sip without fear of exclusion. It was a subtle form of social leveling, temporary, yes, but real. In the back room you check tomorrow's supplies, bundles of dried chrysanthemum, bricks of compressed green tea, tightly sealed jars of honey and plum syrup. Each item is a promise, quietly waiting to be fulfilled. You pause at the side door, cracking it open to let in the night air. The garden outside is shadowed now, moonlit shapes and breathing soil. Somewhere under the loquat tree, a toad croaks softly. Your apprentice appears behind you with the incense box. You nod, and she lights the final stick, placing it on the altar in the corner with steady hands. The sweet smoke curls upward, tracing invisible prayers through the rafters. A fringe tidbit comes to mind. Some Tang tea shops, especially those located near temples or on pilgrimage routes, maintain tiny altars within their walls where travelers could offer thanks or quiet supplications to local spirits or ancestors. These spaces weren't loud with incense or chanting. They were quiet, like breath held in reverence. You kneel briefly, not to pray, but simply to listen. The world outside is still, just the wind moving through the alleys, the soft creak of timber as the building cools, and somewhere the steady drip of a water clock resetting itself for the new day. Historians still argue whether these nightly rituals were purely religious or merely cultural routine. Some claim it was about spiritual cleansing. Others say it was just a convenient excuse for reflection. Either way, you understand the need to mark the end of a day, To name it, bless it, and then let it go. Your apprentice begins stacking the low stools and folding the worn cloths. You move to gather the coins, counting them silently while mentally tallying repairs, orders, and perhaps, if the budget allows, a new clay teapot with a better fitting lid. Suddenly you hear it, a faint tap at the door. You look to your apprentice, who raises an eyebrow. It's late. Very late. You unlatch the door and find a young traveler standing under the lantern's glow. His robe is dusty, his eyes tired. He bows deeply. "Forgive the hour," he says. "I've come from Luoyang. I was told you brew the kind of tea that lets even restless men sleep." You gesture him inside. He sits quietly, hands folded, eyes scanning the room like a man looking for an anchor. You pour him a cup, gentian and chrysanthemum, and place it before him without a word. He drinks, then breathes. Then, only then, he allows himself to exhale fully. You don't ask questions. Some guests arrive with stories, others come only with silence. The tea receives them all the same. The fire in the brazier dies slowly. Your apprentice tucks her hands into her sleeves and rests against the doorway, eyes half-lidded but still awake. You move slowly now, clearing the final bowls, each movement a quiet signature on the day's work. Another lantern is extinguished. The shadows lengthen. You roll up the tatami mats and sweep the hearth one last time. Outside, the moon is higher, more brilliant, casting silver edges on everything it touches. The traveler finishes his tea and bows again. "Thank you," he says, voice barely above a whisper. You nod. Some moments require no more than that. As he slips into the night, the silence behind him folds in like silk. You step outside, standing briefly beneath the stars. There is peace in this hour, peace earned by kindness and repetition, brewed slowly across time. Tomorrow will bring more guests, more tea, more laughter, more fatigue. But for now, the night belongs to stillness. The shop stands behind you like a breathing thing, tired, but content. You step back inside and close the door. A hush has settled across the street outside the shop, broken only by the distant echo of a wooden cartwheel creaking its way around the corner, then vanishing into the night. You move slowly through the front room, fingers brushing the edge of each table as if saying goodnight to the furniture itself. Your apprentice has already gone upstairs, the soft thud of her steps muffled by the thick wood of the stairwell. Her room overlooks the small garden in the back, and you know she'll keep the window cracked open to hear the frogs sing. You pour yourself the last bowl of tea, barely a mouthful, just enough to taste the last breath of the leaves. The liquid is cool now but sweet. You drink it slowly, allowing each note to linger before swallowing. A good tea always ends gently, with the memory of warmth even after the heat has faded. You sit by the fire, now only embers, glowing low and steady like the heartbeat of the room. Beside you, the broom rests in its corner. You should put it away. You don't. Not yet. A mainstream historical fact comes to you softly, like an old friend arriving at the edge of a dream. Tea culture during the Tang Dynasty wasn't just about flavor or refreshment. It was philosophy, rhythm, and daily ritual. Great poets like Lu Tong and Lu Yu wrote of its spiritual importance, how the act of brewing tea could reflect the moral character of a person. In tea, there was purity, focus, and the chance to pause. You glance at the ledger resting on the counter. Its pages open to today's tally. A few smudged notes in the margins. Someone wanted extra honey, someone else forgot their coin purse. You'll sort it tomorrow. Tonight you're too tired to worry about debts and inventory. The incense has burned down to a faint thread of ash, curling like mist along the corner of the altar. You don't brush it away. Let it stay, a trace of prayer left behind. From the eaves a moth flutters, spirals once around the room and settles near the window. Its wings shimmer faintly in the lantern light. You watch it, and for a moment your thoughts flutter too, to memories of youth, a first tea brewed clumsily, the scolding of a master, the pride of learning. The shop has grown old with you, or perhaps you've grown into it. The lines on the walls in your hands tell a similar story. A fringe historical detail drifts through your reverie. Some Tang tea shops hosted amateur poetry readings late at night. Patrons would write verses on fans or silk napkins, tucking them under teacups to be discovered by morning staff. You've never found one in your shop, but sometimes you wonder what your guests carry quietly in their hearts as they sip in silence. The moon has crossed the midpoint of the sky, casting long shadows across the lattice windows. You rise, stretching slowly, and walk to each lantern. One by one, you snuff them gently with a clay cone until only the smallest remains, a quiet glow to guide you upstairs. Historians still argue whether these small rituals, the folding of mats, the counting of coins, the final extinguishing of lights, were formalized acts of closing or simply intuitive human behavior. But to you it feels sacred, necessary, a way to honor what the day brought and what the night asks for in return. You ascend the steps, each tread familiar, polished smooth by years of movement. In your room, the window is already open. A breeze carries the scent of night jasmine and riverstone. You undress slowly, folding each layer carefully, setting it on the bench beside the wall. You sit on the edge of your futon, rubbing your knees absently, then reach for the lacquered box beside your pillow. Inside, a single sprig of dried tea blossom, yellowed with time, but still whole. A reminder. Of what? You're not entirely sure anymore. But it brings comfort. The final light is extinguished. You lie back and listen. Outside, frogs, wind, the murmur of leaves brushing stone. Inside, wood creaking, the memory of tea, your own breath slowing, and beneath it all, the steady, gentle hum of a life well tended, brewed each day with patience, poured with quiet hands, shared with strangers who leave a little less restless than when they arrived. Word count 187, wind down 300 words. The room grows quieter now, the shadows deeper, the rhythms slower. Outside the window, the moon drifts high and slow, a silent lantern crossing the heavens. You rest beneath its light, wrapped in warmth and the familiar sounds of the night. Each creak of the wood, each sigh of wind against the eaves, is a lullaby drawn from memory. The tea shop behind you sleeps now. Bowls are cleaned, mats rolled, the fire long since cooled. Yet in your mind the scents linger. Roasted barley, plum syrup, chrysanthemum, a hint of pine smoke from the hearth. They drift gently through your thoughts, softening the edges of the day. You feel your muscles relax, your limbs sink deeper into the bed's quiet embrace. The pulse of the city has faded completely. There is no more need for action, for speech, for remembering what comes next. Only the now, only this breath, and the one that follows. In some far-off corner of the city, another tea shop prepares for morning. But here now all is still. Let the past day rest, let the next wait. Tonight you are cradled by stillness, by the steady rhythm of a world that has always turned and will continue to turn, with or without you. And as your breathing slows to match its pace, you allow your thoughts to drift, like wisps of steam, rising from a forgotten cup. Let go, you've done enough, let the quiet take you, let the story end, sleep now.